The city never sleeps, they say. And on that particular Tuesday morning in Manhattan, with the streets already buzzing with yellow cabs and hurried pedestrians clutching their coffee cups, Emma Carter felt like the entire world was moving faster than she could keep up. Her heart was racing, her palms were sweating, and the straps of her worn leather bag kept sliding off her shoulder as she rushed through the revolving doors of the Whitmore Tower, one of the most imposing buildings in Midtown. She was late. Terribly, unforgivably late. On her very first day, Emma had spent the entire previous night rehearsing what she would say, how she would introduce herself, the confident smile she would wear when meeting her new colleagues. She had ironed her only good blouse 3 times, checked her resume for typos she knew weren't there, and set not 1 but 4 alarms on her phone. But the subway had other plans. A signal malfunction at Lexington Avenue had trapped her underground for nearly 40 minutes, and by the time she emerged onto the street, she was already 20 minutes behind schedule. Now, as she stood in the gleaming marble lobby, staring at the directory board that listed dozens of companies across 30 floors, she felt a wave of panic wash over her. Whitmore Global Enterprises, 42nd floor, Strategic Planning Department. She repeated it like a mantra as she pressed the elevator button, willing her breathing to slow down, willing her mind to focus. This job was everything. It had to be. After months of sending out applications, after countless rejections, after watching her savings dwindle to almost nothing in her tiny studio apartment in Queens, this temporary position as an executive assistant had felt like a miracle. The pay was decent. The company was prestigious, and if she played her cards right, if she proved herself valuable enough, maybe, just maybe, they would keep her on permanently. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Emma stepped inside, pressing the button for the 42nd floor. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirrored walls and quickly smoothed down her dark brown hair, tucking a stray strand behind her ear. Her reflection stared back at her with anxious green eyes, and she forced herself to take another deep breath. "You can do this," she told herself. "You're smart. You're capable. You just need a chance." When the elevator reached her floor and the doors slid open, Emma was greeted by an expanse of glass walls, sleek modern furniture, and the quiet hum of productivity. This was nothing like the cramped, fluorescent-lit offices she had worked in before. This was power. This was success. This was a world she had only glimpsed from the outside, and now she was stepping into it. A woman in a crisp navy suit looked up from the reception desk, her expression polite but impatient. Emma hurried over, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I'm so sorry I'm late. Traffic was awful. Well, not traffic exactly. The subway, there was a delay, but I'm here now. I'm Emma Carter. I'm supposed to start today in strategic planning." The receptionist's eyes softened slightly and she nodded. "You're with the Anderson team, right? Temporary assistant position?" "Yes, that's me." "Okay, well, you'll need to get your badge and do orientation first. Take the hallway to your left. Go all the way down and you'll see the HR office. They'll get you set up." Emma thanked her profusely and turned, walking quickly down the indicated hallway. Her heels clicked against the polished floor, and she tried to ignore the curious glances from the employees she passed. Everyone here looked so put together, so confident, so like they belonged. And here she was, flustered and sweaty, and probably looking like she had just run a marathon. The hallway seemed to go on forever, and Emma's sense of direction had never been her strongest asset. She passed several doors, each with frosted glass panels and minimal labeling. Conference Room A, Executive Suite, Private Office. The signs blurred together, and she felt her anxiety rising again. Where was HR? Had she missed it? Should she go back and ask? Then she saw it, a door slightly ajar, with what looked like a small sign that might have said something about facilities or personnel. Relief flooded through her, and without thinking, without pausing to read the sign more carefully, Emma pushed the door open and stepped inside. The first thing she registered was steam. Warm, thick steam that clouded the air and smelled faintly of expensive soap, and something else, something masculine and clean. The second thing she registered was that this was definitely not the HR office. And the third thing, the thing that made her freeze completely, was the man standing in the middle of the room. He had just stepped out of a shower. His dark hair was wet, water still dripping from the ends onto his broad shoulders. A white towel hung low on his hips, barely secured, revealing a torso that looked like it had been carved from marble, all defined muscles and tanned skin. His eyes, a startling shade of steel grey, locked onto hers with an expression that was equal parts shock and something else, something harder to define. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't move. She couldn't speak. She could only stand there, rooted to the spot, her face burning with mortification as her brain struggled to process what was happening. This was not happening. This could not be happening. The man's eyes narrowed, and for a long, terrible moment neither of them said anything. The only sound was the faint drip of water hitting the tile floor, each drop echoing in the silence like a countdown to her complete and utter humiliation. "Oh my God," Emma finally managed to choke out. "I am so sorry. I thought this was, I didn't mean to," the sign said. I thought it said, I'm new and I'm lost and I'm so incredibly sorry." She was rambling. She knew she was rambling, but she couldn't stop. Her hands were shaking, and she could feel heat spreading from her cheeks down her neck, probably turning her entire face a shade of crimson that would be visible from space. The man continued to stare at her, his expression unreadable. He didn't reach for a robe. He didn't tell her to get out. He just stood there, water dripping from his hair, his jaw tight, his eyes boring into hers with an intensity that made her knees feel weak. "Who are you?" His voice was low, controlled, but there was an edge to it that sent a shiver down Emma's spine. I'm Emma Carter. I just started today. I'm an assistant in strategic planning. I was looking for HR. I got lost. I'm so sorry. I'll go." She took a step backward, her hand reaching blindly for the door handle behind her, but her eyes, traitor that they were, couldn't seem to look away from him. From the way his chest rose and fell with each breath, from the water droplets that traced paths down his skin, from the way his towel sat dangerously low on his hips, held in place by what seemed like sheer willpower. Emma Carter. He repeated her name slowly, as if testing how it sounded. "First day and you're already breaking into executive bathrooms. I wasn't breaking in, I made a mistake. I'm really sorry. Do you know who I am?" Emma's mind raced. Should she know? Was this someone important? Of course he was someone important. This was clearly a private bathroom, attached to what looked like an executive suite. And he was standing there like he owned the place, which he probably did. "Oh God, oh God, oh God." "No," she whispered. "I don't." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or amusement. It was hard to tell. "Alexander Whitmore," he said simply. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. Alexander Whitmore. The Alexander Whitmore. Owner and CEO of Whitmore Global Enterprises. The man whose name was on the building. The man who was known throughout the business world as brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely unforgiving when it came to mistakes. And she had just walked in on him half naked in his private bathroom. "I think I'm going to be sick," Emma breathed. That's not the reaction I usually get from women. Despite everything, despite the horror and the embarrassment, and the certainty that her career was over before it had even begun, Emma felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in her throat. She clamped her lips together, but it escaped anyway, a small strangled sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "I'm sorry," she said again. "I'm so sorry. I'll go now. I'll pack my things. I'll leave." "I understand. I didn't tell you to leave." Emma blinked. "What?" Alexander took a step toward her, and she instinctively took a step back, her shoulders hitting the door. He was close now, close enough that she could see the water droplets clinging to his eyelashes, close enough that she could smell that scent again, cedar and something crisp and clean. "You're trembling," he observed. "I'm terrified," Emma admitted, because apparently her filter had completely abandoned her, along with her common sense and any hope of making a good first impression. "Good, you should be." But he didn't sound angry. He sounded, if anything, curious, like he was studying her, trying to figure out something that didn't quite make sense to him. Emma's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. This close, she could see that his eyes weren't just grey, they had flecks of blue in them like storm clouds. And there was a small scar above his left eyebrow, a thin white line that somehow made him look more human, less like the intimidating figure she had read about in business magazines. "Why aren't you leaving?" he asked quietly. I don't know," Emma stammered. "You told me not to. I didn't tell you to stay either." He was playing with her. She could see it now, a hint of something in his eyes that might have been amusement. He was enjoying this, watching her squirm, watching her struggle to maintain some shred of dignity while standing in front of him in his private bathroom, while he wore nothing but a towel. Anger flickered through Emma's embarrassment. Who did he think he was? Well, she knew who he was, but still. This wasn't fair. This wasn't professional. This is inappropriate, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. And I should go. Now. She reached for the door handle again, and this time she managed to grasp it. But before she could turn it, Alexander spoke again. "Emma Carter. First day. Strategic planning." "Yes," she said, not turning around. "Don't be late tomorrow." It wasn't until she was back in the hallway, the door firmly closed behind her, that Emma realized what he had said. "Don't be late tomorrow," which meant he wasn't firing her, which meant somehow impossibly she still had a job. She leaned against the wall, her legs shaking, and pressed her palms against her eyes. What had just happened? Had that really just happened? Had she really just walked in on the CEO of the company in his private bathroom on her first day of work? "Emma," a voice called out, and she jumped, her hands dropping to her sides. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a clipboard was walking toward her. "There you are. I'm Janet from HR. We've been looking for you. The receptionist said you headed this way, but you must have gotten turned around." "I did," Emma managed. "I definitely got turned around." "Well, come on, let's get you sorted out. We have a lot to cover on your first day." As Emma followed Janet back down the hallway, past the door that she now knew led to Alexander Whitmore's private suite, she tried to steady her breathing. Tried to convince herself that it was just a mistake, just an embarrassing mishap that would blow over. But she couldn't shake the image of him standing there, water dripping from his hair, his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that had made her feel like she was burning from the inside out. She couldn't forget the way her heart had raced, the way her breath had caught, the way every nerve in her body had seemed to come alive under his gaze. This was bad. This was very, very bad, because Emma had come to Whitmore Global looking for a job, for a chance, for an opportunity to prove herself. She had not come looking for complications. She had not come looking for a man who looked at her like he could see straight through to her soul. She had not come looking for trouble, but trouble, it seemed, had found her anyway. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Janet took her through orientation, showed her where everything was, introduced her to what felt like 100 different people whose names Emma forgot almost immediately. She was given her badge, her employee handbook, and a stack of forms to fill out. She was shown to her desk, a small cubicle in the strategic planning department, sandwiched between two other assistants who seemed friendly enough but also too busy to chat. Emma tried to focus. She really did. But her mind kept drifting back to that bathroom, to those grey eyes, to the way Alexander Whitmore had looked at her like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve. She jumped every time someone walked past her cubicle. She held her breath every time she heard footsteps in the hallway. Part of her was terrified that he would appear, that he would have changed his mind, that security would escort her out of the building. But another part of her, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, was almost disappointed when he didn't. By lunchtime, Emma felt like she was going to crawl out of her skin. She grabbed her bag and headed for the elevators, planning to find a quiet coffee shop where she could decompress and try to process everything that had happened. But as she waited for the elevator, she heard a voice behind her that made her entire body tense. "Miss Carter." Emma turned slowly. Alexander Whitmore was standing there, now fully dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit and crisp white shirt. His hair was dry now, styled perfectly, and he looked every inch the powerful CEO she had read about. But those eyes, those grey eyes with the blue flecks, were the same. "Mr. Whitmore," Emma managed, proud that her voice didn't shake. "How can I help you? Walk with me." It wasn't a request. It was a command. And despite the voice in her head that told her this was a bad idea, that she should make an excuse and run, Emma found herself nodding. They walked in silence, down another hallway, past more glass-walled offices and conference rooms. Emma was acutely aware of the curious glances they were attracting, of the way people seemed to slow down and stare as the CEO walked past with the new assistant nobody knew. Finally, Alexander stopped in front of a door and pushed it open, gesturing for her to enter. It was a conference room, small and private, with a large window overlooking the city skyline. Emma stepped inside, and he followed, closing the door behind them. "About this morning," he began. "I already apologized." Emma interrupted, then immediately regretted it. "You weren't supposed to interrupt the CEO. You definitely weren't supposed to sound defensive when you did it." But Alexander just raised an eyebrow. "I know, I'm not looking for another apology." "Then what?" Emma started, then stopped. "What are you looking for?" He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "I want to know if you can handle working here." "Of course I can," Emma said quickly. "This morning was just a mistake, a one-time thing. It won't happen again." "That's not what I mean." He moved closer, and Emma resisted the urge to back away. "This company is demanding. The work is intense. The hours are long. People quit all the time because they can't handle the pressure." "I can handle pressure, can you?" He tilted his head slightly. "Because from where I'm standing, you look like you're about to bolt." Emma lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. "I'm not going anywhere. I need this job, and I'm good at what I do. One embarrassing mistake doesn't change that." Something shifted in his expression. A hint of respect, maybe. "Or challenge, prove it," he said simply. "How? I have a project. It's important, it's complex, and it's confidential. I need someone I can trust to handle it. Someone who pays attention to details. Someone who doesn't make careless mistakes." The implication was clear. Someone unlike the person who had barged into his bathroom that morning. "I can do it," Emma said firmly. "Whatever it is, I can do it." Alexander pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then looked back at her. "Check your email. I just sent you the brief. I need a preliminary analysis by end of day Thursday. No extensions. No excuses." "Understood." He started to walk past her toward the door, then paused. "And Miss Carter, yes? If you walk into my bathroom again, make sure it's on purpose." Emma's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. He was looking at her with an expression that was definitely, unmistakably amused. And maybe something else. Something that made heat spread through her chest and down into her stomach. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click, leaving Emma standing alone in the conference room, her heart racing all over again. What had he meant by that? Was it a joke? A warning? A proposition? No, she was reading too much into it. He was just messing with her, getting revenge for the morning's intrusion. That was all. Emma took a deep breath and pulled out her phone, opening her email. Sure enough, there was a message from Alexander Whitmore with the subject line, "Strategic Analysis, Confidential." She opened it and started reading, and with each paragraph, her eyes grew wider. This wasn't just some busy work to keep her occupied. This was a real project, a major acquisition deal worth millions of dollars. He was trusting her with actual important work, or he was testing her, waiting for her to fail so he could justify firing her. Well, Emma thought grimly, she wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. She spent the rest of the day buried in research, taking notes, cross-referencing data, building spreadsheets and charts and graphs. She barely noticed when her colleagues left for the evening. She barely noticed when the cleaning crew came through. She was focused, driven by a mixture of determination and something else, something that had to do with grey eyes and a half smile, and a voice that said, "Make sure it's on purpose." It was past 9 when she finally looked up from her computer, her eyes burning and her neck stiff. The office was quiet, most of the lights dimmed. Emma saved her work, backed it up twice just to be safe, and gathered her things. As she walked toward the elevators, she noticed that there was still a light on in one of the corner offices. The office with Alexander Whitmore's name on the door. Emma told herself to keep walking, told herself it was none of her business if the CEO worked late, told herself that stopping, that even glancing in that direction was a mistake. But she slowed down anyway. And she looked. Through the glass wall she could see him sitting at his desk, his jacket discarded, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He was leaning back in his chair, one hand rubbing his temples like he had a headache. He looked tired, human, not at all like the intimidating figure who had stood in that bathroom that morning. As if sensing her presence, Alexander looked up. Their eyes met through the glass. Emma's first instinct was to run, but something kept her rooted in place. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was defiance. Maybe it was that same thing that had made her stay in that bathroom when he had told her she should be terrified. Alexander stood up and walked to his door, opening it. "Working late, Miss Carter." "So are you," Emma pointed out. "I own the company." "What's your excuse?" "I'm working on your project. It's not due until Thursday. I know, but I want to make sure it's done right." He leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms over his chest. "Most people would have gone home hours ago. I'm not most people." "No," he said quietly. "You're not." There was something in his voice that made Emma's pulse quicken, something that reminded her of that moment in the bathroom, when his eyes had been locked on hers, and the air between them had felt charged with electricity. "I should go," Emma said, but she didn't move. "You should." Alexander agreed, but he didn't move either. They stood there in the dim hallway, the silence stretching between them. Emma knew she should leave. Knew that whatever this was, this tension, this pull, it was dangerous. Knew that getting involved with her boss, with the CEO of the company, would be career suicide. But God, the way he was looking at her, like she was the most interesting thing he had seen in years, like he couldn't quite figure her out, and it was driving him crazy. "Good night, Mr. Whitmore," Emma finally said, forcing herself to take a step backward. "Alexander," he corrected. "When we're alone, call me Alexander." That's not appropriate," Emma stammered. "Neither was this morning," he pointed out. But it happened anyway. Emma felt heat rising to her cheeks again, but this time it wasn't just embarrassment. It was something else, something that made her skin feel too tight and her breath come too fast. "Good night, Alexander," she whispered, and then she turned and walked away, feeling his eyes on her with every step, knowing that something had shifted between them, something that couldn't be undone. As Emma rode the elevator down to the lobby and stepped out into the cool New York night, she realized that her first day at Whitmore Global had been nothing like she had imagined. She had come looking for a job, for stability, for a chance to prove herself, but she had found something else entirely, something complicated and confusing and absolutely terrifying. She had found Alexander Whitmore, and somehow, impossibly, he had found her too. And Emma had the sinking feeling that nothing was ever going to be the same again. The next morning, Emma arrived at the office exactly 15 minutes early. She had learned her lesson. No more subway mishaps, no more being late, and definitely, absolutely, under no circumstances, no more walking into the wrong rooms. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Alexander Whitmore standing there in that towel, water dripping from his dark hair, those steel-grey eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. And then she would remember his words in the hallway. "When we're alone, call me Alexander." Make sure it's on purpose. What did that even mean? Was he flirting with her? Was he warning her? Was he testing her to see if she would crack under the pressure and quit? Emma shook her head as she stepped off the elevator onto the 42nd floor. It didn't matter. What mattered was proving herself, doing excellent work on this project and keeping things strictly professional. No matter how attractive he was, no matter how her heart had raced when he looked at her, no matter how his voice had sounded when he said her name, professional, that was the key. She settled into her cubicle and opened her laptop, pulling up the analysis she had started the night before. The acquisition deal was complex, involving a European tech company with operations in 12 countries. There were regulatory issues, market considerations, potential conflicts with existing contracts. It was exactly the kind of challenge Emma loved, the kind of work that made her feel alive and useful and capable. She was deep in a spreadsheet, cross-referencing financial data, when a shadow fell across her desk. Emma looked up to find a woman standing there, probably in her early 30s, with sleek blonde hair pulled back in a perfect French twist and a designer suit that probably cost more than Emma's entire wardrobe. Her smile was friendly, but her eyes were calculating, taking in every detail of Emma's appearance. "You must be the new girl," the woman said, her voice smooth and cultured. "Emma, right? I'm Victoria Sterling, Senior VP of Strategic Development." Emma stood quickly, extending her hand. "Nice to meet you, Miss Sterling. Victoria, please." Victoria's handshake was firm, her nails perfectly manicured, So how are you finding Whitmore Global so far? Not too overwhelming, I hope. It's intense, Emma admitted, but I like a challenge. Good, you'll need that attitude here. Victoria leaned against the edge of Emma's cubicle, her posture casual but her gaze sharp. I hear you're working on something for Alexander directly. That's unusual for a first-week assistant. Emma felt a flicker of unease. How did Victoria know that already? The project was supposed to be confidential. I'm just doing what was assigned to me, Emma said carefully. Of course. Victoria's smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. Word of advice, though, be careful. Alexander is brilliant, but he's also ruthless. He has very high standards, and he doesn't tolerate mistakes. People who disappoint him tend to find themselves out of a job pretty quickly. I'll keep that in mind. I'm sure you will. Victoria straightened, smoothing down her skirt. Well, welcome to the team. If you need anything, my office is on the east side. Don't hesitate to ask. Thank you. As Victoria walked away, her heels clicking rhythmically against the floor, Emma felt that unease deepen. There had been something off about that conversation, something that felt less like a friendly welcome and more like a warning. Or maybe a threat. Emma tried to shake it off and return to her work, but she couldn't quite focus. She found herself watching Victoria through the glass walls as she made her way across the floor, stopping to chat with various employees. Everyone seemed to know her. Everyone seemed to defer to her. Was Victoria involved with Alexander? The thought came unbidden, and Emma immediately pushed it away. It was none of her business. Alexander Whitmore's personal life was absolutely none of her concern, but still, the thought lingered. Emma was saved from spiraling further by an email notification. She clicked on it and felt her stomach drop. Conference room 7, 10 minutes. Bring your preliminary notes. It was from Alexander. 10 minutes. Emma looked at her screen, at the half-finished analysis, at the notes that were still scattered and disorganized. She had told him she would have everything done by Thursday. It was only Wednesday morning. She wasn't ready, but Alexander Whitmore clearly didn't care about her timeline. Emma grabbed her laptop, a notebook and a pen and hurried toward the conference rooms. Her hands were shaking slightly as she pushed open the door to conference room 7. Alexander was already there, standing by the windows with his back to her, looking out over the Manhattan skyline. He was wearing another perfectly tailored suit, this one a dark navy that made his shoulders look impossibly broad. His hands were in his pockets, his posture relaxed, but there was a tension in his shoulders that suggested he was anything but calm. "You're early," he said without turning around. "You said 10 minutes. Most people would have taken 12. Emma set her laptop down on the conference table, taking a moment to steady herself. "I'm not most people." That earned her a glance over his shoulder, and she caught the hint of a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "No," he said. "You're certainly not." He turned fully then, moving to take a seat at the head of the table. Emma sat across from him, opening her laptop and pulling up her notes. "Show me what you have," Alexander said. Emma took a deep breath and began to present her analysis. She walked him through the financial projections, the market research, the regulatory hurdles. She pointed out potential risks and suggested mitigation strategies. She had done her homework, and despite her nerves, she found herself getting into a rhythm, her confidence growing as she spoke. Alexander listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving her face. It was unnerving, the way he focused on her so completely. Like nothing else in the world existed except her words, her ideas, her presence. When she finished, there was a long moment of silence. Then Alexander leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. "Not bad," he said finally. Emma felt a rush of relief. Not bad. From Alexander Whitmore, that was practically a glowing review. "But there are gaps," he continued. "You haven't addressed the currency exchange risks. And your timeline for regulatory approval is optimistic at best." Emma felt her cheeks flush. He was right. She had been so focused on the big picture that she had glossed over some of the details. "I can revise it," she said quickly. "I'll have a complete version by Thursday like we agreed." "No." Alexander stood, walking around the table until he was standing directly beside her chair. "Do it now." Emma looked up at him, her neck craning back. "But I need to research the currency issues, and the regulatory timeline requires accessing databases I don't have clearance for yet." I'll give you clearance. And I'll stay here while you work. If you have questions, ask them. He pulled out the chair next to hers and sat down, close enough that Emma could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtly masculine. Close enough that when he leaned over to look at her screen, his shoulder brushed against hers, sending a jolt of electricity through her body. Emma tried to focus. She really did. But it was almost impossible with Alexander sitting right there, his presence overwhelming, his proximity making her hyper-aware of every breath, every movement, every accidental touch. She pulled up the currency data and started analyzing exchange rate trends. Her fingers fumbled on the keyboard, hitting the wrong keys twice before she managed to type correctly. Nervous? Alexander asked, his voice low and far too close to her ear. No, Emma lied. Liar. She turned her head to glare at him and immediately realized her mistake. He was right there, mere inches away, close enough that she could see the individual flecks of blue in his grey eyes, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. This is inappropriate, Emma breathed. Is it? Alexander's eyes dropped to her lips for just a fraction of a second before returning to meet her gaze. You're the one who walked into my bathroom yesterday. I'd say inappropriate is relative. That was an accident, was it? Yes, so if I asked you to do it again, you'd say no? Emma's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. This was insane. This was her boss. This was the CEO of the entire company. This was a man who could destroy her career with a single word. Yes, she whispered, I would say no another lie. He smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made heat pool in her stomach. You're not very good at lying, Emma Carter. And you're not very good at maintaining professional boundaries, Mr. Whitmore. The words were out before she could stop them, sharp and defiant, and Emma immediately regretted them. You didn't talk to the CEO like that. You didn't challenge him, didn't snap at him, didn't... Alexander laughed. It was a real laugh, genuine and surprised, and it transformed his entire face. The hard edges softened, the tension eased, and for just a moment, he looked younger, more approachable, almost human. You have more spine than I gave you credit for, he said. Still smiling. Good, I hate people who kowtow. Then you hired the wrong assistant, Emma muttered, turning back to her laptop before she could do something stupid, like smile back at him. They worked in silence for a while, Emma revising her analysis while Alexander sat beside her, occasionally asking questions or pointing out things she had missed. Despite the tension, despite the awareness that made her skin feel too sensitive and her breathing uneven, they fell into an easy rhythm. He was brilliant, she realized, sharp and insightful, seeing connections and implications that she had overlooked, and he was teaching her. Not in a condescending way, but genuinely sharing his knowledge, explaining his thought process, treating her like an equal rather than a subordinate. It was intoxicating. By the time they finished, it was nearly 1 in the afternoon, and Emma's stomach was growling audibly. When was the last time you ate? Alexander asked. Yesterday dinner, maybe. I was working late, Emma defended. Alexander stood, extending his hand to her. Come on. Emma looked at his hand like it might bite her. Where? Lunch, unless you plan to starve yourself for this job. I brought a sandwich, which is probably warm and soggy by now. His hand was still extended, waiting. Emma Carter, are you always this stubborn? Yes, good. He grasped her hand and pulled her to her feet in one smooth motion. Let's go. Before Emma could protest further, before she could remind him that this was a terrible idea, that people would talk, that she had only been there 2 days, and going to lunch with the CEO would paint a target on her back. Alexander was already leading her out of the conference room and toward the elevators. They rode down in silence, and Emma was acutely aware of the curious stares from the other people in the elevator. She could practically hear the gossip starting already. Who was that with Mr. Whitmore? The new girl. Isn't she just an assistant? What's going on there? Alexander seemed completely oblivious to the attention, or maybe he just didn't care. When the elevator reached the lobby, he guided her toward the street with a hand on the small of her back. A touch that was simultaneously professional and intensely intimate. There's a place around the corner, he said. Best sandwiches in Midtown. I really don't think this is necessary. Emma tried one last time. Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her, right there on the crowded sidewalk, with people streaming past them on both sides. "Emma Carter," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You worked through the night on my project, then came in early this morning. And you've been in that office for hours without eating. I'm not going to be responsible for you passing out from low blood sugar. So you have two choices. You can have lunch with me, or I can order food delivered to your desk and watch you eat it. Your call. You're very bossy," Emma said. "I'm the CEO. It's literally my job description." "Fine. Lunch. But I'm paying for my own sandwich." "Absolutely not." "Why?" "Because I have more money than you." "That's not a valid reason. It's the only reason I need." They stared at each other for a long moment, and then Emma felt a smile tugging at her lips, despite her best efforts to remain professional and annoyed. "You're impossible," she said. "I've been told that before," Alexander replied, and the warmth in his eyes made Emma's breath catch. The sandwich shop was small and crowded, filled with the lunchtime rush of office workers, grabbing quick meals. Alexander led her to a table in the back corner, somehow managing to find a spot that was relatively private, despite the chaos around them. Emma ordered a turkey and avocado sandwich and reluctantly let Alexander pay for it. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, and Emma was surprised to find that she felt relaxed, almost normal sitting across from him. "Tell me about yourself," Alexander said suddenly. Emma looked up from her sandwich. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Where you're from, what you studied, why you wanted to work at Whitmore Global." "That's a lot of questions. We have time." Emma set down her sandwich, wiping her hands on a napkin. "I'm from upstate New York, a small town called Rhinebeck. I went to SUNY Albany, studied business and economics. Graduated 3 years ago and moved to the city because that's what you do when you want to make it in the business world, right? You go to New York. And how's that working out for you?" Emma laughed, but there was a bitter edge to it. "Honestly, it's been rough. The job market is brutal, and I don't have the connections that a lot of people have. I've been working temp jobs, living in a studio apartment that's barely bigger than a closet, eating ramen more often than I'd like to admit. This job at Whitmore Global, it's the first real opportunity I've had, so I'm not going to mess it up. Even if it means having lunch with the CEO?" Alexander's eyes glinted with amusement. "Especially if it means having lunch with the CEO," Emma shot back. Alexander laughed, and Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest. She liked making him laugh, liked the way his whole face changed when he did, the way the hard businessman facade cracked to reveal something softer underneath. "Your turn," Emma said. "Tell me about you." "There's not much to tell. I inherited the company from my father, expanded it, made it more profitable. End of story." "That's not a story. That's a resume summary. What do you want to know?" Emma leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "Everything. Where you're from, what you studied, why you're still single." The words were out before she could stop them, and Emma felt her face flush hot. Oh God, had she really just asked her boss why he was single? What was wrong with her? But Alexander didn't seem offended. If anything, he looked intrigued. "Who says I'm single?" he asked quietly. Emma's stomach dropped. "Oh, I just assumed. I didn't mean to assume, I'm sorry." "Relax, Emma, I am single. I was just curious why you would ask. I shouldn't have. It's none of my business, you're right." "It's not." Alexander took a sip of his water, his eyes never leaving hers. "But since you asked, the answer is simple. I don't have time for relationships. The company demands everything I have. Most women aren't willing to accept that." "Most women," Emma repeated. "But not all." "Not all." There was something in the way he said it, something in the way he was looking at her that made Emma's pulse quicken. Was he talking about her? No, that was ridiculous. He barely knew her. They had only met yesterday in the most mortifying circumstances possible. "What about you?" Alexander asked. "Why are you single?" "How do you know I'm single?" "No ring, no photos on your desk. And the way you blushed when you asked about my relationship status." Emma felt her cheeks warm again. "I don't have time for relationships either. I've been too focused on trying to survive in this city, trying to build a career. Romance kind of takes a back seat when you're worried about making rent. That's practical." "It's lonely," Emma admitted, then immediately wished she could take it back. Why was she telling him this? Why was she being so honest with a man she barely knew? But Alexander just nodded, his expression understanding. "Yeah," he said softly, "it is." They finished their lunch in companionable silence, and when they walked back to the office, Emma felt like something had shifted between them. Like they had crossed some invisible line, moving from boss and employee to something else, something more complicated and dangerous. The rest of the week passed in a blur of work, late nights, and increasingly frequent encounters with Alexander. He would appear at her desk with new assignments, each one more challenging than the last. He would call her into meetings, asking for her opinion on strategy decisions. He would send her emails late at night with questions about the acquisition project, and she would respond immediately, unable to resist the pull of his attention. And always there was the tension. The way his hand would brush against hers when he handed her a document. The way his eyes would linger on her face when she was talking. The way the air seemed to thicken whenever they were alone together. Emma knew it was dangerous. Knew that people were starting to notice. She could feel the stares, hear the whispers that stopped when she walked past. Victoria Sterling, in particular, seemed to watch her with increasing intensity, her smiles growing colder each time they crossed paths. On Friday afternoon, Emma was in the break room making coffee when Victoria appeared beside her, her presence sudden and unwelcome. "You've made quite an impression this week," Victoria said, her voice light but her eyes hard. "I've just been doing my job," Emma replied, keeping her tone neutral. "Of course." Victoria poured herself a cup of coffee, her movements precise and controlled. "But you should know that Alexander has a history of being interested in his employees. It never ends well for them." Emma's hand tightened on her coffee cup. "I don't know what you're implying, but my relationship with Mr. Whitmore is strictly professional." "Is it?" Victoria's smile was sharp. "Then why has he given you 3 major projects this week? Why is he requesting your presence in executive meetings? Why is he taking you to lunch? How did you—" "People talk, Emma. This building is full of eyes and ears. And trust me when I say that Alexander's attention is not something you want. It burns bright and fast, and then it's over. And when it's over, you're the one who pays the price." Before Emma could respond, Victoria walked away, leaving her standing alone in the break room with her coffee growing cold and her mind racing. Was Victoria right? Was Alexander just playing with her, amusing himself with the new assistant who had stumbled into his bathroom? Or was there something real between them, something worth the risk? Emma didn't have time to figure it out because her phone buzzed with a text message. "My office now." It was from Alexander. Emma's heart started to race as she made her way to his office. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the floor, and most of the staff had already left for the weekend. The office felt empty, quiet, almost intimate. She knocked on Alexander's door and heard his voice call out for her to enter. He was standing by the windows again, his jacket off, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He looked tired, she realized, and stressed. There were lines around his eyes that she hadn't noticed before. "You wanted to see me?" Emma asked, closing the door behind her. Alexander turned to face her. "I got an email from the board. They want to move forward with the acquisition. They loved your analysis." "That's good news," Emma said, though something in Alexander's tone suggested it wasn't entirely good. "It is." Alexander moved closer, and Emma felt that familiar pull, that magnetic attraction that made her want to step toward him, even as her mind screamed at her to maintain distance. "It means I need you to come with me to London next week. We're meeting with the target company's executives. I need someone who understands the details of the deal." "London?" Emma's eyes widened. "Like, I don't have a passport that's current, and I've never been to Europe, and I don't think I'm senior enough to—" "Emma." Alexander's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm not asking. I'm telling you. You did excellent work. You deserve to be there. Say yes." Emma looked up at him, at those grey eyes that had haunted her dreams all week, at the face that had become dangerously familiar. She knew this was a bad idea. Knew that going to London with Alexander Whitmore would blur the already hazy lines between professional and personal. Knew that she was playing with fire. But God help her, she wanted to get burned. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll go." Something flashed in Alexander's eyes, something hot and intense that made Emma's breath catch. "Good," he said. his voice rougher than before. They stood there in the growing darkness, the lights of the city beginning to twinkle outside the windows, the office silent around them. Emma knew she should leave. Knew she should walk out that door before something happened that couldn't be undone. But she couldn't move. And neither, it seemed, could Alexander. "You should go," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I know," Emma replied, but she didn't move. Emma. Her name on his lips was almost a caress, and she felt herself swaying toward him, drawn by a force she couldn't resist. "This is a bad idea," she breathed. "The worst," Alexander agreed, but he moved closer anyway, his hand coming up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her lower lip with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the intensity in his eyes. "If you want me to stop, say so now," he murmured. Emma's mind was screaming at her to say it, to tell him to stop, to maintain whatever shred of professionalism they had left. But her heart, her body, every nerve ending that had been on fire all week, wanted something else entirely. "Don't stop," she whispered. And then his lips were on hers and the world exploded into sensation. The kiss was everything she had imagined and nothing she could have prepared for. It was fierce and tender, demanding and giving, a collision of need and desire that left her breathless and trembling. Emma's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Alexander's arm came around her waist, holding her against him as he deepened the kiss. She could taste coffee on his lips, could feel the rapid beat of his heart against her chest, could lose herself completely in the way he was kissing her like she was oxygen and he was drowning. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "We can't do this," he said, but his arms were still around her. "I know." Emma agreed, but her hands were still tangled in his shirt. "You work for me, I know. People will talk, they already are." Alexander pulled back slightly, looking down at her with eyes that were dark with desire, but also conflicted. "This could ruin you," he said quietly. "Your reputation, your career, everything you've worked for." Emma met his gaze steadily. "Then I guess we'll have to be careful." A slow smile spread across Alexander's face. "You are full of surprises, Emma Carter." "So are you, Alexander Whitmore." He kissed her again, softer this time, almost reverent, and Emma felt herself falling, tumbling into something deep and dangerous and absolutely terrifying. When she finally left his office an hour later, her lips swollen and her mind spinning, Emma knew that everything had changed. There was no going back now, no pretending that this was just a professional relationship, no denying the attraction that had been building between them since that first moment in the bathroom. She had crossed the line. They both had. And as Emma rode the subway home to her tiny apartment in Queens, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Because whatever happened next, whatever consequences came from this reckless, impulsive decision, she had never felt more alive than she did right now, with the taste of Alexander Whitmore still on her lips and the memory of his hands on her body burning through her like wildfire. The game had changed, and Emma was all in. The weekend passed in a haze of nervous energy and conflicting emotions. Emma spent Saturday cleaning her apartment, doing laundry, trying desperately to distract herself from the memory of Alexander's lips on hers, his hands on her waist, the way he had looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. But every time she closed her eyes, she was back in that office, pressed against him, feeling the rapid beat of his heart matching her own. Sunday was worse. She tried to read, to watch television, to do anything that would quiet the voice in her head that kept asking what the hell she had done. She had kissed her boss. Not just any boss, but the CEO of the entire company. A man who could fire her with a single word, who held her career in the palm of his hand. A man who was powerful, wealthy, and completely out of her league. And yet, when she thought about pulling away, about telling him this was a mistake, about going back to a purely professional relationship, her entire body rebelled against the idea. Because that kiss had been real. The connection between them was real. And Emma had spent too many years being practical, being careful, playing it safe, to walk away from something that made her feel this alive. Her phone buzzed late Sunday evening, and Emma's heart jumped when she saw Alexander's name on the screen. "Flight leaves Tuesday morning at 8. Car will pick you up at 5:30. Pack for 4 days. Business formal for meetings, but bring something comfortable for the flight." Emma stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She should respond with something professional, something that established boundaries. Instead, she typed, "I've never flown business class before." The response came immediately. "You'll never want to fly, coach, again." Then another message. "Are you having second thoughts?" Emma bit her lip, considering her answer. "Yes," she typed honestly. "Aren't you?" The phone rang before she could send it, Alexander's name flashing on the screen. Emma answered, her heart racing. "If I'm having second thoughts," his voice was low and intimate through the phone. "It's only about whether I can keep my hands off you for an entire week in London." Emma felt heat flood through her body. "Alexander," she breathed. "Tell me you haven't been thinking about it," he challenged. "Tell me you haven't been remembering Friday night." "I can't." "Good, because I can't either." He paused, and Emma heard him take a deep breath. "Emma, I need you to understand something. This, whatever this is between us, it's not something I do. I don't get involved with employees. I don't blur lines. I built my entire career on maintaining control, on keeping things professional, but you walked into that bathroom and something shifted. I can't explain it. I can't rationalize it. All I know is that when I'm around you, all those rules I've lived by for years suddenly don't seem to matter anymore." Emma sat down on her bed, her legs suddenly weak. "What are we doing?" she whispered. "I don't know. But I want to find out. If you're willing." Emma thought about Victoria's warning, about the whispers in the office, about the career she had worked so hard to build, about all the very good reasons why this was a terrible idea. And then she thought about the way Alexander looked at her, the way he made her feel seen, valued, important, the way his kiss had awakened something inside her that she hadn't even known was sleeping. "I'm willing," she said. She could almost hear his smile through the phone. "Get some sleep, Emma Carter. Tuesday's going to be a long day." After they hung up, Emma lay back on her bed, staring at the ceiling of her tiny apartment. In less than 48 hours, she would be on a plane to London with Alexander Whitmore. And whatever happened there would determine the course of everything that came after. She had never been more terrified or more excited in her entire life. Tuesday morning arrived too quickly. Emma was waiting outside her apartment building at 5:25, her suitcase at her feet, when a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The driver got out, a professional-looking man in his 50s who introduced himself as James and took her luggage with practiced efficiency. During the drive to JFK, Emma tried to calm her racing heart. She had dressed carefully in a navy blue dress with a cream blazer, professional but flattering, and she had spent more time on her makeup than usual. Not because she wanted to impress Alexander, she told herself, just because she wanted to look put together for an international business trip. The lie felt hollow, even in her own mind. When they arrived at the airport, James led her through a different entrance than she had ever used before, bypassing the long security lines and crowded terminals. They went through a private checkpoint, and Emma realized with a start that this was how the other half traveled. No waiting, no hassle, just smooth efficiency from start to finish. Alexander was waiting in the private lounge, and when Emma saw him, her breath caught in her throat. He was wearing dark jeans and a black sweater, casual but expensive, and he looked more relaxed than she had ever seen him at the office. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he had run his fingers through it, and when he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that made her knees weak. "You look beautiful," he said, standing to greet her. "You look different," Emma replied. "Less CEO, more normal person. Is that a compliment?" "I think so." Alexander laughed and gestured to the comfortable seating area. "We have about 30 minutes before boarding." "Want some coffee?" They settled into plush chairs, and a server appeared almost immediately with coffee and pastries. Emma tried not to stare at the luxury surrounding them, the way everything seemed effortless and elegant. This was Alexander's world, she realized. Private cars and private lounges and first-class everything. It was so far removed from her reality of subway commutes and cramped apartments that it felt almost surreal. "You're quiet," Alexander observed. "Nervous about flying?" "A little," Emma admitted. "I don't do this often. Actually, I don't do this ever." "London?" "Any of it. International travel, business class, private airport lounges." She gestured around them. "This isn't my world, Alexander." "It could be," he said quietly. Emma looked at him sharply. "What does that mean?" It means that you're talented, Emma, brilliant even. The work you did on the acquisition analysis was better than what some of my senior executives produce. You could have a real future at Whitmore Global, if you want it. And what does that future look like? Alexander leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes serious. Honestly, I don't know yet. I'm breaking all my own rules here. But I want to figure it out, with you. Before Emma could respond, an announcement came over the speaker system informing them that their flight was ready for boarding. Alexander stood and offered her his hand, and Emma took it, feeling the now familiar electricity that sparked whenever they touched. The plane was like nothing Emma had ever experienced. Their seats were in a private cabin, essentially a small room with 2 seats that reclined into beds, a personal entertainment system, and enough space that Emma felt like she could do cartwheels if she wanted to. Alexander showed her how everything worked, patient and amused by her wide-eyed wonder. This is insane. Emma breathed as she settled into her seat. This is Tuesday, Alexander replied with a grin. The flight attendant came by to offer them champagne, and Emma accepted, thinking that maybe a little alcohol would help calm her nerves. As the plane taxied down the runway, she gripped the armrests, her knuckles white. Alexander reached over and covered her hand with his. First time flying? No, but I've never been comfortable with takeoff. Close your eyes, he said softly, and breathe. Emma did, focusing on the warmth of his hand, the steady rhythm of her breathing. When the plane lifted off the ground, she felt her stomach drop. But Alexander's thumb was stroking the back of her hand in soothing circles, and somehow it helped. When they reached cruising altitude and Emma opened her eyes, she found Alexander watching her with an expression that was tender and possessive all at once. Better? He asked. Much. Good, he didn't let go of her hand. So tell me something about yourself that I don't know. Emma thought for a moment. Like what? Anything. Something real. Something you don't tell people usually. Emma bit her lip, considering. Okay, I wanted to be a writer when I was younger. Not business reports and financial analyses. Creative writing, novels, stories that made people feel something. Why didn't you? Because it's not practical. Because you can't pay rent with dreams. Because I watched my parents struggle their whole lives. Because they followed their passions instead of being sensible. And I swore I wouldn't make the same mistakes. So you chose business instead. I chose stability. Or at least I tried to. She laughed without humor. Turns out stability is harder to find than I thought. Alexander was quiet for a moment, his thumb still tracing patterns on her hand. You know what I think? What? I think you're still a writer. You just write in spreadsheets instead of sentences. But the creativity is still there. The passion is still there. I see it in the way you approach problems, the way you build narratives around data. Emma felt tears prick at her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. No one had ever seen that part of her, the part she had buried under years of practicality and responsibility. Thank you, she whispered. Your turn, Alexander said, changing the subject with the ease of someone who recognized when emotions were getting too raw. Ask me something. Okay. Emma turned in her seat to face him more fully. Why did you really ask me to come on this trip? You could have brought anyone. Someone more senior, someone with more experience. Because you understand the deal better than anyone else. Because you did the work. He paused, his eyes searching hers. And because I wanted you here, with me. The honesty in his voice took Emma's breath away, even knowing it's complicated. Even knowing people will talk. Especially knowing that. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Emma, I've spent my entire life doing what was expected of me. Being the dutiful son, the responsible CEO, the man who always makes the right decision. But when I'm with you, I don't want to be that person. I want to be reckless. I want to take risks. I want to see what happens when I stop controlling everything. And what do you think will happen? I think, Alexander said, his eyes dropping to her lips, we're about to find out. He kissed her then, soft and slow, completely inappropriate for a public space even if they were in a private cabin. Emma's logical brain tried to remind her that there were flight attendants who could walk in, that this was wildly unprofessional, that they needed to establish boundaries. But her body didn't care about any of that. Her body only cared about the way Alexander's lips moved against hers, the way his hand came up to cup her cheek, the way he kissed her like he had been starving for the taste of her. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since Friday night," he admitted. "It's only been 3 days, longest 3 days of my life." They spent the rest of the flight talking, sometimes about work, but mostly about everything else. Emma learned that Alexander had studied at Harvard, that he played piano, that he had a younger sister who lived in California and called him every Sunday. He learned that Emma was afraid of spiders, that she could quote entire scenes from classic movies, that she made the best chocolate chip cookies in the world according to her grandmother. It was easy, Emma realized, being with him like this, away from the office and the expectations and the complications. It felt natural, like they had known each other for years instead of days. She dozed off somewhere over the Atlantic, her head resting on Alexander's shoulder, and when she woke up, there was a blanket draped over her, and his arm around her shoulders, holding her close. "We land in an hour," he murmured when he saw her eyes open. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Emma admitted. "Good." They landed at Heathrow early in the morning, London time, and Emma was grateful for the coffee that appeared as soon as they were through customs. Another car was waiting for them, and as they drove through the streets of London, Emma pressed her face to the window like a child, taking in the historic buildings, the red double-decker buses, the organized chaos of the city. Alexander watched her with obvious amusement. "You've really never been here before?" "I've barely been anywhere. Queens to Manhattan is about as exotic as my travels have gotten. Then we'll have to fix that. After the meetings are done, we'll have some time. I can show you around. You don't have to do that." "I want to," Alexander said firmly. "Besides, I like seeing the city through your eyes. Reminds me why it's special." They checked into the hotel, a stunning 5-star property in Mayfair, and Emma tried not to gape at the opulence of the lobby with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Alexander handled the check-in, while Emma stood to the side, suddenly very aware that she was out of her depth. The woman at the front desk handed Alexander 2 key cards, and Emma felt her stomach drop. 2 rooms, of course. They were here for business. Whatever was happening between them personally didn't mean they would be sharing a room. But then Alexander turned to her and said, "You're in the suite next to mine. There's a connecting door, but it stays locked from your side. Your choice whether to open it." Emma took the key card, her fingers brushing against his. "What if I want to open it?" His eyes darkened. "Then I would suggest you get some rest first. Because once that door opens, Emma, I'm not sure I'll be able to let you leave." Heat flooded through her body, and Emma was suddenly very grateful that the lobby was mostly empty. "Noted," she managed to say. Her suite was enormous, with a king-sized bed, a sitting area, a marble bathroom with a soaking tub, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Hyde Park. Emma stood at the window, taking in the view, trying to process everything that was happening. She was in London, in a luxury hotel, with Alexander Whitmore, and there was a connecting door between their rooms. Emma walked over to the door and stared at it for a long moment. On the other side, she could hear movement, water running, the sound of Alexander moving through his own space. All she had to do was unlock it, turn the handle, step through. But was she ready for that? Was she ready for whatever would happen if she did? Her phone buzzed with a text and Emma jumped. It was from Alexander. "Meetings start at 2. That gives you 4 hours to rest, shower, and decide whether you want to open that door. No pressure either way, but know that I'm hoping you will." Emma read the message 3 times, her heart pounding. Then she walked over to the connecting door, took a deep breath, and turned the lock. The door opened from the other side almost immediately, and Alexander stood there in jeans and a t-shirt, his hair damp from the shower, his feet bare. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Hi," Emma said softly. "Hi," Alexander replied. They stood there in the doorway, neither moving, the tension between them so thick Emma could barely breathe. "I should probably shower and get ready for the meetings," Emma finally said. "You probably should. But I don't want to." "Good. Neither do I." Alexander reached out and took her hand, pulling her gently into his suite. It was larger than hers, more masculine in its decor with dark woods and rich fabrics. But Emma barely noticed any of it, because Alexander was closing the distance between them. his hands coming up to frame her face, his eyes searching hers for permission. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. "Because once we do this, Emma, there's no going back." "I don't want to go back," Emma whispered. And then his mouth was on hers, and Emma was lost. The kiss was different from the others, deeper and more urgent, fueled by 3 days of wanting and an ocean's worth of distance from their normal lives. Alexander's hand slid into her hair, tilting her head back, and Emma made a sound that was part sigh, part moan. He walked her backward until her legs hit the bed, and they fell onto it together, a tangle of limbs and breathless laughter. Alexander propped himself up on his elbows, looking down at her with eyes that were dark with desire. "You're so beautiful," he murmured, tracing her cheekbone with his thumb. "I've been thinking about this since the moment you stumbled into my bathroom. That was the most embarrassing moment of my life," Emma said. "That was the moment my life changed," Alexander countered. He kissed her again, slower this time, exploring, tasting, learning what made her gasp and what made her sigh. Emma's hands slid under his shirt, feeling the hard muscles of his back, and she felt him shudder against her. They stayed like that for a long time, kissing and touching but not crossing the final line, both of them somehow knowing that once they did, everything would be different. This was already intimate, already more than Emma had shared with anyone in years, and she wanted to savor it. Eventually, reluctantly, Alexander pulled back. "We really do need to get ready for those meetings," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "I know." Emma agreed, but she didn't move. "If we don't leave this bed in the next 5 minutes, I'm canceling everything. Alexander, Emma." He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips again. "You're making it very difficult to be responsible." "Since when do you want to be responsible?" "Since I realize that I want to take my time with you, not rush. Not treat this like it's just physical." Emma felt her heart squeeze. "What is it then?" "I don't know yet," Alexander admitted, "but I want to find out properly." He helped her up, both of them straightening their clothes and trying to look presentable. Emma caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror and winced. Her hair was messed up, her lips were swollen, and she looked thoroughly kissed. "Perfect," Alexander said from behind her, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I look like a disaster. You look happy." He wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder as they looked at their reflection together. "And that makes you beautiful." Emma turned in his arms and kissed him one more time, soft and sweet. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For making me feel like this. For seeing me." Alexander's expression grew serious. "Emma, I want you to know something. Whatever happens with us personally, it won't affect your job. You're talented and brilliant, and you've earned your place at Whitmore Global. Us, it's separate, okay?" Emma nodded, grateful for the reassurance even as part of her wondered if it could really be that simple. They separated to get ready for the meetings, Emma returning to her own suite to shower and change into her business suit. By the time she was dressed and professional again, she almost managed to convince herself that she could keep things separate. Business Emma and personal Emma, it was doable. Until she met Alexander in the lobby and saw the way his eyes heated when he looked at her, and she knew it was a lie. There was no separating the two. Not anymore. The meetings were intense, lasting most of the afternoon and into the evening. Emma sat in on the presentations, took detailed notes, and when asked for her analysis, delivered it with a confidence that surprised even herself. The executives from the target company were impressed, and she could see Alexander's pride in the way he looked at her across the conference table. But she could also see something else: possessiveness, desire, the promise of what would happen when they were alone again. By the time they left the last meeting, it was nearly 9 in the evening and Emma was exhausted. They had dinner at a restaurant near the hotel, a quiet place with low lighting and excellent food. And they talked about the meetings, about the deal, about everything except what was really on both their minds. "You did well today," Alexander said, as they walked back to the hotel through the London streets. "They were impressed with you." "They were impressed with your company," Emma corrected. "No, they were impressed with you. There's a difference." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together, and Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the wine they had drunk with dinner. When they reached their floor, They walked to their suites in silence, the tension building with every step. Alexander unlocked his door, then turned to face her. "That connecting door is still unlocked," he said quietly. "From my side." Emma looked at him, at this man who had turned her life upside down in the span of a week, and made her decision. "Mine too," she whispered. Alexander's eyes flashed with heat. "Then I'll see you in 5 minutes. Make it 3. Emma went into her suite and quickly changed out of her business clothes and into the silk pajamas she had packed. Her hands were shaking as she brushed her teeth, as she took down her hair, as she stared at herself in the mirror and tried to calm her racing heart. This was it. This was the moment where everything changed. She walked to the connecting door and opened it. Alexander was waiting on the other side, and when he saw her, he smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger and happier than she had ever seen him. He held out his hand. "Come here," he said softly, and Emma went, stepping through the doorway and into his arms, into his room, into a night that would change everything between them. Whatever happened next, whatever consequences came from crossing this line, Emma knew one thing for certain. She was falling for Alexander Whitmore, and there was no safety net to catch her. Emma woke up wrapped in Alexander's arms, the morning light filtering through the curtains of his London suite, and for a moment she let herself believe that this was real, that this could last, that the world outside this room didn't exist with all its complications and consequences. Alexander stirred beside her, his arms tightening around her waist, pulling her closer. "Morning," he murmured against her hair, his voice still rough with sleep. "Morning," Emma replied softly. They stayed like that for a long moment, neither wanting to break the spell, neither wanting to face the reality of what they had done. Last night had been everything Emma had imagined and more. Alexander had been gentle and passionate, taking his time, making her feel cherished and desired in ways she had never experienced before. They had talked for hours afterward, sharing stories and secrets, laughing at nothing and everything, until they finally fell asleep tangled together. And now, in the clear light of morning, Emma had to confront what it all meant. "What are you thinking?" Alexander asked, sensing her tension. "That we have meetings in 2 hours, that we're in London for business. That last night was—" Emma paused, searching for the right words. "Last night was incredible. But I don't know what happens next." Alexander shifted so he could look at her face, his grey eyes serious. "What do you want to happen next?" Emma bit her lip. "Honestly, I want this. I want you. But I'm also terrified. Terrified of what it means for my career, for my reputation. Terrified that I'm in way over my head." "You are," Alexander said bluntly, and Emma felt her heart sink until he continued. "But so am I. Emma, I've built my entire life on control and predictability. And then you walked into that bathroom, and everything I thought I knew about myself went out the window. I'm terrified too." "You are." "Absolutely. Because what I feel for you, it's not something I can control or compartmentalize or manage like a business deal. It's messy and complicated and completely irrational, and I want it anyway." Emma felt tears prick at her eyes. "So what do we do?" "We take it one day at a time. We finish this trip. We go back to New York, and we figure it out together." Alexander cupped her face in his hands. "But Emma, I need you to know something. I'm not playing games here. This isn't just about attraction or convenience. When I'm with you, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years. And I'm not willing to give that up without a fight, even if it gets complicated, especially if it gets complicated." They kissed then, soft and slow, a promise of things to come. And when they finally got up to face the day, Emma felt like something fundamental had shifted inside her. She was still scared, still uncertain about the future, but she wasn't alone in it anymore. The rest of the London trip passed in a blur of successful meetings, stolen kisses in empty hallways, and nights spent wrapped in each other's arms. The acquisition deal was moving forward smoothly, and Emma's contributions were being recognized by everyone involved. She felt confident, capable, like she was finally becoming the professional she had always wanted to be. But underneath the success was a growing sense of dread about returning to New York. Here in London, they existed in a bubble, far away from office politics and prying eyes, but back home reality would intrude. People would notice. Questions would be asked. And Emma knew that not everyone would be happy about the CEO's relationship with a temporary assistant. Their last night in London, Alexander took her to dinner at an elegant restaurant overlooking the Thames. They talked about everything and nothing, and Emma tried to memorize every detail. The way the candlelight flickered across his face, the sound of his laugh, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. "You're quiet again," Alexander observed. "Just thinking about going back worried?" "Yes," Emma set down her wineglass. "Alexander, when we get back to New York, everything is going to change. People are going to talk. They're going to make assumptions. And I'm the one who's going to bear the brunt of it, not you." "You're right," Alexander said, surprising her with his honesty. "It's not fair. But I'm not going to let anyone treat you badly because of our relationship. And I'm not going to hide what we have like I'm ashamed of it. I'm not asking you to hide it. I'm just asking you to understand that this is going to be harder for me than it is for you. I know. And I'm going to do everything I can to protect you. But what if you can't?" Emma asked quietly. "What if this ends up destroying everything I've worked for? Then we'll deal with it together." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Emma, I can't promise you that this will be easy, but I can promise you that I'm committed to making it work. To making us work." Emma wanted to believe him. She really did. But as they flew back to New York the next day, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were flying toward a storm. The first sign of trouble came on Monday morning when Emma arrived at the office. The receptionist's smile was a little too knowing, and Emma could feel eyes on her as she walked to her desk. The whispers started almost immediately, low voices that cut off when she got too close. "Did you hear she went to London with him? After only 2 weeks on the job? I wonder what she did to get that assignment." Emma tried to ignore it, to focus on her work, but it was impossible. Every time she looked up, someone seemed to be watching her. And when Victoria Sterling appeared at her cubicle mid-morning, Emma knew the real problems were just beginning. "Welcome back," Victoria said, her smile sharp as a knife. "How was London?" "Productive," Emma replied carefully. "The meetings went well, I'm sure they did." Victoria perched on the edge of Emma's desk, her posture casual but her eyes predatory. "You know, it's funny. I've worked here for 8 years, and Alexander has never once invited me on an international business trip. But you've been here 2 weeks and suddenly you're indispensable. I was asked to go because I worked on the acquisition analysis. Of course. That must be it." Victoria leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Word of advice, Emma. Whatever you think is happening between you and Alexander, it's not going to last. He gets bored easily. And when he does, you'll be the one left dealing with the fallout while he moves on to the next shiny new thing." Before Emma could respond, Victoria stood and walked away, leaving Emma shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. The rest of the day was torture. Emma tried to concentrate on her work, but the whispers followed her everywhere. In the break room, in the bathroom, in the elevator. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, she felt like she was going to crawl out of her skin. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "My office, please." Emma gathered her things and made her way to the executive floor, hyper-aware of the stares she was attracting. When she reached Alexander's office, she found him standing by the window, his shoulders tense, his jaw tight. "Close the door," he said without turning around. Emma did, her heart sinking. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the air, in the set of his shoulders, in the coldness of his voice. Alexander turned to face her, and Emma was shocked by the hardness in his eyes. "We need to talk," he said. "Okay," Emma replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "There's been some complications with the acquisition deal. The board is questioning some of the analysis, questioning the projections." "What kind of complications?" Alexander pulled out a folder and handed it to her. Emma opened it and felt the blood drain from her face. It was her analysis, but with changes. Numbers that were different from what she had submitted. Projections that were wildly optimistic, bordering on fraudulent. "I didn't write this," Emma said immediately. "These aren't my numbers." "Then whose are they?" Alexander's voice was cold, detached, and Emma felt panic rising in her throat. "I don't know. Someone must have changed them. Altered the files. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth." Emma looked up at him, pleading with her eyes for him to believe her. "Alexander, you know me. You know my work. I would never submit something like this. Do I know you, Emma? We've known each other for 3 weeks, and now the board is questioning my judgment, questioning whether I promoted this deal based on sound analysis or personal involvement. The words hit Emma like a physical blow. Personal involvement. So that's what this was about. He was questioning whether she had used their relationship to manipulate him. You think I did this on purpose? Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. You think I seduced you to get ahead? I don't know what to think, Alexander said, and the uncertainty in his voice was worse than outright accusation. All I know is that my company is at risk. My reputation is at risk, and I need to figure out what happened. What happened is that someone is sabotaging me, Emma said, her voice rising. Someone who wants to destroy my credibility and drive a wedge between us. Can't you see that? Then prove it, Alexander said flatly. Show me evidence. Because right now all the evidence points to you either being incompetent or manipulative, and neither option is good. Emma felt like she had been slapped. After everything they had shared after London, after the promises and the intimacy and the trust, he was choosing to believe that she was either stupid or calculating. Fine, Emma said, her voice cold with hurt and anger. I'll prove it. And when I do, you're going to regret doubting me. She turned and walked out of his office, refusing to let him see the tears that were streaming down her face. By the time she reached the elevator, she was shaking so hard she could barely press the button. In the lobby, she nearly collided with someone. Emma, are you okay? Emma looked up through blurry eyes to see Margaret Chen, one of the senior analysts she had met during her first week. Margaret was in her late 50s, one of the few women who had been with Whitmore Global for decades, and she had always been kind to Emma. I'm fine, Emma managed to say, though it was obvious she wasn't. Margaret glanced around the lobby, then gently took Emma's arm. Come with me. Let's get some coffee and talk. They went to a small coffee shop around the corner, and Emma found herself pouring out the whole story to Margaret. London, the relationship with Alexander, the altered analysis, his accusation, everything. Margaret listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. When Emma finally finished, Margaret sighed. I was afraid something like this would happen, she said. What do you mean? Victoria Sterling. She's been obsessed with Alexander for years. There was something between them once, I don't know the details, but it ended badly. Since then, she's been circling him like a shark, waiting for another chance. Emma felt her stomach turn. Victoria did this? I can't prove it, but yes, I believe she did. Margaret pulled out her phone. I've been with this company for 30 years, Emma. I've seen people come and go. I've seen office politics at their worst. And I've learned to keep copies of important documents, just in case. She scrolled through her phone, then showed Emma an email. It was from Emma's account, but Emma had never seen it before. It was the altered analysis, sent to the board with a timestamp from the day they were in London. I didn't send that. Emma breathed. I know you didn't, because I was working late that night, and I saw Victoria in your cubicle. She didn't see me. I thought maybe she was just looking for something, but now I realize she was accessing your computer. Can you testify to that? I can do better than that. Margaret's smile was grim. I can show you the security footage. For the first time since leaving Alexander's office, Emma felt a spark of hope. You have security footage. I have a friend in building security. Let me make a call. 2 hours later, Emma was sitting in a conference room with Margaret and the head of building security, watching footage of Victoria sitting at Emma's desk, logged into Emma's computer, clearly manipulating files. The timestamp matched exactly when the altered analysis had been sent. Emma felt vindication war with fury. Victoria had done this, had sabotaged her deliberately, knowing it would destroy both Emma's career and her relationship with Alexander. I need to show this to Alexander, Emma said. Margaret nodded. But Emma, you need to be prepared. Even with this evidence, the damage might already be done. The board has seen the altered analysis. Questions have been raised. And Alexander, Margaret paused, he's a proud man. Admitting he was wrong, admitting he doubted you, that's not going to be easy for him. I don't care if it's easy, Emma said fiercely. He accused me of lying, of manipulation. He needs to know the truth. Then let's go. They went back to Whitmore Tower, Emma's heart pounding with every step. It was after 7, and most of the offices were dark, but Alexander's light was still on. Emma could see him through the glass walls, sitting at his desk with his head in his hands, looking defeated and miserable. Good, a small, petty part of Emma thought. He should feel miserable. Margaret stayed outside while Emma knocked on the door. Alexander looked up, and the hope that flashed across his face when he saw her made Emma's heart clench despite her anger. "Emma," he started, standing, "I've been thinking about what you said. And You need to see this," Emma interrupted, holding up the USB drive with the security footage. Now, she plugged it into his computer and played the footage, watching as Alexander's face went from confusion to shock to cold fury as he watched Victoria sabotaging Emma's work. When it finished, Emma pulled up the metadata on the altered files, showing that they had been changed after Emma had submitted her original analysis. Then she pulled up her own backup files, the ones she had saved on her personal cloud storage, showing the correct numbers, the accurate projections. "This is what I submitted," Emma said, her voice hard. "This is the work I did. And this?" She gestured to the screen showing Victoria. "This is the person who tried to destroy me, to destroy us." Alexander was silent for a long moment, staring at the screen. Then he looked up at Emma, and the anguish in his eyes made her breath catch. "Emma, he started, then stopped. "There aren't words. I'm so sorry. Sorry." Emma's anger flared hot and bright. "You're sorry. Alexander, you accused me of being incompetent or manipulative. You doubted me after everything we shared in London. You chose to believe that I would sabotage my own work, rather than trust that I was telling you the truth. You're right. I was wrong. Completely, unforgivably wrong. Why?" Emma demanded. "Why didn't you believe me?" Alexander ran a hand through his hair, looking more vulnerable than she had ever seen him. "Because I was scared. Because trusting you, really trusting you, means admitting that I've lost control. And control is all I've ever had. It's how I've protected myself, how I've survived in this world. But when the board started questioning my judgment, questioning whether I was thinking with my head or my heart, I panicked. I reverted to type. I pushed you away because it felt safer than risking being wrong about you, so you threw me under the bus to protect yourself." "Yes." Alexander's voice was raw with regret. "And I will regret it for the rest of my life." Emma felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I trusted you," she said quietly. "I gave you everything. I took a risk on you, on us, knowing it could destroy my career. And the first time things got hard, you bailed." "I know, so what now?" Emma asked. "Where do we go from here?" "That's up to you," Alexander said. "If you want to walk away, I'll understand. I'll make sure you get an excellent position somewhere else, excellent references, whatever you need. But if you're willing to give me another chance, if you're willing to let me prove that I'm better than the coward I was today, then I'm going to spend every day showing you that my trust in you is absolute." Emma looked at him, at this powerful, brilliant man who had been brought to his knees by his own fear and pride. Part of her wanted to walk away, to protect herself from ever being hurt like this again. But another part, the part that remembered London and the way he held her and the promises they had made, wanted to fight. "I don't know if I can trust you again," Emma said honestly. "Then let me earn it back." Alexander moved closer but didn't touch her. "I love you, Emma. I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but it's true. I fell in love with you somewhere between that first day in London, and I've been terrified of it ever since. But I'm done being scared. I'm done protecting myself at your expense. If you'll give me a chance, I swear I will never doubt you again." Emma felt the tears finally spill over. "You love me?" "I love you, completely, irrationally, forever." Emma took a shaky breath. "I love you too." "But Alexander, love isn't enough. Not if you're going to run every time things get hard. Not if you're going to choose self-preservation over us. You're right. So let me show you. Let me prove it. How? Let me handle Victoria. Let me clear your name with the board. Let me show everyone in this company that you are the brilliant, capable woman I know you to be. And then, if you still want me, I'm going to ask you to take a chance on us. Really, truly, permanently." Emma wiped at her tears. "And what about the whispers? The gossip? People thinking I slept my way to the top. Let them think what they want. I'm going to make you a full-time senior analyst with a salary that reflects your actual value to this company. And I'm going to make it clear to everyone that your position has nothing to do with our relationship, and everything to do with your talent. And if people still talk, then they talk. Alexander finally reached out, gently touching her cheek. Emma, I can't control what other people think or say, but I can control my own actions. And I choose you. I choose us. Every single time. Emma closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. I want to believe you. Then believe me, trust me. Give me one more chance to get this right. Emma opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the love there, but also the fear, the vulnerability, the desperate hope. And she realized that this was what real love looked like. Not the fairy tale version where everything was easy and perfect, but the messy, complicated, terrifying version where two imperfect people chose each other despite the risks. One more chance, Emma said finally. But Alexander, if you break my trust again, I'm gone. No second chances. No explanations. Just gone, I understand. And I won't. I promise you, Emma, I won't. He pulled her into his arms then, holding her tight, and Emma let herself believe. Let herself hope. Let herself trust one more time. The next morning, Victoria Sterling was called into Alexander's office. Emma wasn't there, but Margaret told her later that it had been swift and brutal. The security footage was shown, the evidence was presented, and Victoria was given exactly 1 hour to clear out her desk before being escorted from the building by security. The board was shown the real analysis. Emma's original work and the acquisition deal was back on track. Alexander made it clear to everyone that Emma's work had been exemplary and that she was being promoted to senior strategic analyst with immediate effect. The whispers continued for a while, as Emma had known they would. But Alexander stood by her through all of it, never wavering, never hiding their relationship. He made a point of praising her work in meetings, of crediting her contributions, of treating her as the professional she was. And slowly the whispers changed. People stopped questioning whether Emma had earned her position and started recognizing her talent. The skepticism turned to respect. The gossip turned to admiration. 3 months after that terrible day in Alexander's office, he took Emma back to that same restaurant in London, where they had their last dinner before returning to New York. They talked about the acquisition, which had been completed successfully. They talked about her work, which continued to exceed expectations. They talked about their relationship, which had grown stronger through the challenges. And then, as dessert was being cleared away, Alexander got down on one knee. Emma Carter, he said, pulling out a small velvet box. You walked into my life by accident, but loving you has been the most deliberate choice I've ever made. You challenged me, changed me, made me want to be better than I ever thought I could be. You are brilliant and brave and beautiful, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you made the right choice in giving me a second chance. Will you marry me? Emma looked at him, at this man who had hurt her and redeemed himself, who had pushed her away and fought to bring her back, who had learned to trust and be vulnerable for the first time in his life. And she knew that this was right. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and true and worth every risk. Yes, she said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I'll marry me. Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple but stunning diamond that caught the light and sparkled like a promise. Then he stood and kissed her, right there in the middle of the restaurant, not caring who saw or what anyone thought, because that's what they had learned, both of them, through all the pain and fear and doubt. That love wasn't about controlling the narrative, or managing perceptions or protecting yourself from getting hurt. Love was about choosing someone every single day, even when it was scary, even when it was hard, even when the world told you it was impossible. Love was about taking a chance. 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony in Central Park, with only their closest friends and family in attendance. Emma wore a simple white dress, and Alexander couldn't take his eyes off her the entire time. When they exchanged vows, they promised not perfection but honesty. Not an easy road, but a shared journey. Not a fairy tale, but a real, complicated, beautiful love. And as they danced together at the reception, Emma thought about that first day when she had stumbled into Alexander's bathroom, mortified and terrified and certain her life was over. She had been looking for a job, for an opportunity, for a chance to prove herself. But she had found so much more. She had found love. She had found partnership. She had found someone who saw her, really saw her, for everything she was and everything she could be. Emma Carter, now Emma Whitmore, had walked through the wrong door and found the right life. And as she looked up at her husband, at the man who had been brutal and tender, distant and devoted, fearful and brave, she knew that every stumble, every mistake, every terrifying choice had led her exactly where she was meant to be, in his arms, in his life, in a love that was worth every risk,